All right, everybody, let's go live. IDF commando units, helicopter deployed, supported by the Israeli Air Forces via airstrikes, struck or did a raid on a military base just south of Damascus. And when I say just south of Damascus, I mean like in a suburb of Damascus, like as close as they have come. And so that's one of the things we're going to be talking about today. And so thank you for being here. Please put where you're watching from in the chat box and we will get started. I'd like to see where everybody's coming in from. Somebody's from the Chicago suburbs. Wow, you're in a war zone. Fort Hood, again. Beaverton, Oregon. Thanks for being here. Utah. All right. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate all of you being on the hot zone today. I am a little dressed up because I just got back from a funeral. And let me tell you something, folks. Life is short. This young man in our church, only 25 years old, lost his life to stomach cancer that came up just a few months ago, which very strange. You know, it was by all appearances, he was a very healthy young man, all of a sudden till he wasn't. So kind of a melancholy day, although we don't mourn like unbelievers. We know that we haven't lost him. We know right where he is, and we will get to see him again. Anyway, we just got back from the funeral. My poor family, feel really sorry for them. He was engaged to be married, and his poor fiance, just that's tough. So there's Norman, Oklahoma. I've got some friends there. Israel. Hi, Josh. So let's talk about this raid into Syria. I showed you the picture there. Where to go? You see these Israeli commandos coming back, and they're carrying something between them, something that looks heavy. So let's figure out what that is, and we'll talk about what came of this mission and what makes it different than some of the other missions that have been done in Syria by the Israeli Defense Forces. So in this case, the targets were at first Syrian soldiers that were stationed at they call it a former military facility in the town of Al-Kiswa. That's about 5 miles south of the center of Damascus. And I've got on the map here so I can show this to you. This is really interesting here. So if we zoom in a little bit, you can see this is a military outpost. It's on a hilltop. I don't know if you can tell that. And it's got some vehicles, like it looks like maybe a couple tanks up there, and some buildings. This shows to be barracks or something. Well, very small, very sparse kind of place. But if we zoom out here, you can see it's up on a hilltop. And it is, if we go just a little bit further, there's the center of Damascus right there. So very close to Damascus. Actually, you could say, I mean, if it's 5 miles from the center of Damascus, I would call that in Damascus, wouldn't you? And so there were about 15 airstrikes around this area in order to secure the site for the raid that came in, okay? And that it appears their objectives were twofold. Number one, it was to stop the Syrian forces under al-Shara from destroying or tampering with surveillance devices that were in place in the area that had been put there by Israel. But you wouldn't normally need to put troops on the ground to do that. And indeed, that's not why they put troops on the ground. They bombed the area first and killed, according to the Syrians, 9 soldiers who were in the area. There were nine fatalities there. And then the other airstrikes would have been in places like on this road to stop or slow the response of other military units because they're so close to Damascus. This is very risky. They would probably hit this road here, and they probably would have hit maybe any other access route to the site that they attacked. Now, the second reason that they went there and they actually put troops on the ground has to do with surveillance devices that they recovered that had been emplaced by Turkey. Now, some reports say those surveillance devices may have been emplaced up to 10 years ago. That'd be during the reign of Bashar al-Assad. And they were Turkish in nature. So the question is, like, what kinds of devices are we talking about here? These alleged Turkish surveillance devices that had been planted in the area. Now, some reports in English about this raid claimed that the Israelis dropped paratroopers in, and that sort of gave the impression that they had been parachuted into the site, dropped by parachute. I don't think that's the case, because if you go back to the original reporting, which is in Arabic, the word that they used for airborne, or that they translated into airborne assault, because you have to understand the difference here. In military parlance, an airborne assault is one that uses parachutes, where people jump out of an aircraft and float to the ground using a parachute. A helicopter-borne assault is not an airborne assault, it's an air assault mission. So the difference between airborne and air assault is whether or not they use a plane or a helicopter, or jump out using parachutes, or land in a helicopter. In this case, I think that the English reporting on this actually mistranslated the Arabic word, because the Arabic word is a little ambiguous, and they just called it like an airborne assault. Well, again, this is where it helps to have a journalist who's been in the military, because your typical journalist would have no idea that there's a difference between airborne and air assault. And so then they can end up putting out the wrong message. You might think, well, it's a minor point, and you'd be right. It's a minor point. But if they had actually done an airborne mission with parachutes, it would have been the first time that the Israelis had done a mission like that in this war. And that would have been significant. But other sources say that there were 4 helicopters that came in and dropped off commandos. And so what we can surmise from that is that there were not parachutes, there were helicopters, and this was an air assault mission. All right? You're not going to get that on CNN. This is the kind of thing that I saw in Ukraine all the time. Whenever a vehicle drove by, a military vehicle that was painted green, the CNN reporters on my right and left would be like, "We're watching tanks rolling through the streets here," just because it was a big green military vehicle. And I would be like, "No, those aren't tanks. That's a BMP or a BRDM or a APC or something like that. That's a green painted Volkswagen Bug. That's not a tank." Just like they call, every weapon that they see is an assault rifle. That's a very ambiguous term. And in my opinion, to be a good journalist, you want to be as precise as possible. So to be precise about this mission in Syria, It was a helicopter-borne raid into Al-Kiswa, backed up by about 15 airstrikes on nearby Syrian army and pro-Iranian militia positions. And those airstrikes were designed to soften up the target and the defenses and isolate that target site so that commandos could come in there and could spend time on the ground getting what they needed. So that's when they do their sensitive site exploitation, or SSE, where they drop in and they pick up everything of value. We're talking about cell phones, computers, papers, anything like that that might give some intelligence. They put it all in a big bag and then they carry that out with them. Apparently, these commandos were on the ground for about 2 hours. And so again, that's why you saw those 15 airstrikes all around the area, because they needed to keep the Syrian forces in the area kind of off balance so that they couldn't respond with troops and get the troops into a big firefight. The most difficult thing to do is extract troops that are under fire. Sending those helicopters back in there would have been a very risky proposition if there had been a ground fight going on. So they did that to sort of seal off the area. Now, this site is approximately 40 kilometers from the border with Israel. So that's what, 25 miles or something. So, I mean, if everything went wrong with the mission, those commandos could possibly have done evasion and escape to get on foot or in vehicles or something back to the border and get across. But that would be fraught with lots of risk, because that whole area, especially between Damascus and the Israeli border, is full of those Bedouin tribes that are aligned with ISIS. So it's not like these heavily armed Israeli commandos could have just waltzed back there and been just fine. They would have had to fight their way out, and that would have been pretty ugly. So it was a daring and audacious raid. Thank you for that $10. It's very kind to you. It always kind of surprises me when people value my work enough to actually donate and say, hey, we want to help keep you in the field doing what you're doing. We use a lot of that money to support the sort of ministries of helping people around the world, whether it's in Israel or Ukraine or Colombia or Burma. There are many other places where we've been able to help people thanks to your generosity. So I appreciate that very much. So again, these commandos were on the ground for about 2 hours, and they were retrieving documents, dismantling surveillance hardware, and gathering intelligence. Now, they probably could get as much intel from that surveillance hardware than they could get from anything else on the site. Now, what are we talking about here? What kind of surveillance hardware are we talking about? Well, we're talking about listening equipment. We're talking about potentially, radar, because that location, go back to the map here, is, again, zoom out here, and we'll switch to an easier view. So from their location to the Israeli border, which is now here, they actually, if they're on a hilltop, they actually have a pretty straight shot at the border, almost line of sight. So the raid removed those long-standing Turkish surveillance systems that could very much have given the Turks information that Israel didn't want them to have. Now, you have to understand, Israel and Turkey have not been in direct military confrontation so far in this war. Now, Turkey recalled its ambassador to Israel after October, 22nd or something of 2023, when Israel invaded Gaza. Turkey has been very harsh in its criticism of Israel for doing so, and they recalled their ambassador from Israel and cut off communications with Prime Minister Netanyahu's office and that sort of thing. And they've been, again, very harsh in their criticism of Israel pretty much the entire time. Their most recent, Turkish Presidential Communications Office condemned the Israeli airstrike on the Nasser hospital in Gaza a few days ago, calling it another war crime and an assault on press freedom. And, there's been a couple of, the Israelis have done investigations into what happened there. They've determined that Hamas did have a camera set up at that hospital that was filming Israeli troops and giving Hamas operatives real-time information as to the location of those troops. So that makes the hospital a military target right there. But not only that, we have the eyewitness account of one of the former hostages, where she talks about how Hamas used the Nasser hospital for military purposes and for holding those Israeli hostages. So take a listen to what she had to say when she testified before Congress. Oh, I'm sorry. Hang on a minute.
But it was a lie. They transferred me to a hospital. Now I know it was the Nasser hospital. They look us through the back entrance and walk us past all the civilians. In the hospital, there was an area which was closed off and used only by Hamas. With an armored ward, they look us in a room where we meet the third hostage. The next morning, around 10 a.m., they told us again that we are going home. They moved us on another room and made me undress to check I have no surveillance device on me. Later, they briefed us, checked us, gave us supplies, and told us to get into a car waiting outside. But instead of taking us to freedom, they take us to a tunnel. There we see more hostages, some of whom were my friends from my kibbutz near us. I saw Eitan Oren and David Cuño there, who still remain in hands of Hamas.
Okay, so obviously that hospital was a legitimate military target. If there were journalists there and they were standing around a camera that was being used by Hamas, then you get what you get. That's not a good place to set up. And so that was not Israel aiming at journalists. That was Israel taking out a direct threat to its troops. Now back to Turkey. Turkey and Israel, even though they have been at odds over this war, they have actually in some ways worked together, at least in terms of putting together a deconfliction channel that allows them, as kind of a back channel for them to communicate with each other so that they don't accidentally end up, like shooting down each other's fighter jets or something like that over Syria. Because we know that Turkey has a lot of military force inside Syria. We know that Israel has a lot of military forces inside Syria. And what we really want to avoid, everybody wants to avoid, is a scenario where those two forces end up going up against each other, because then you've got one of America's strongest allies and a NATO member going head to head, and that would be very complicated and difficult for the United States to thread that needle. So they're putting this deconfliction channel together to keep that from happening. Now, on top of that, though, tensions are very high between Turkey and Israel. And so Israel is spying on Turkey, Turkey is spying on Israel, everybody's spying on everybody, especially in Syria. Now, what kinds of listening devices or electronic or signals intelligence gathering devices might they actually have inside Syria? And I actually made a little slideshow of what some of these devices look like. So take a look at this. This is a spy rock that was actually found in the UK, in London, and it was emplaced by Russia. So it looks like a rock on the outside, but it's got some sort of electronic listening device on the inside. And apparently the Russians have been placing these things all over Europe, and probably the Israelis have been placing these all over the Middle East, things like this. Here's another one. This is an Israeli device that was found in Lebanon. Give you a sense, that this appears to me, because of its location, to be movement or seismic sensors. Now, it could be something else, could be some shortwave radar or something like that, but it's another kind of sensor that Israel puts in. And I've told you before, I mean, you've heard this many times on my podcast, that Israel puts these things all over the place. Inside Gaza, inside Lebanon, inside Syria, inside Iran. They've got devices and cameras and microphones and stuff all over the place. So here's another one. This is another Israeli listening post. And now this looks like a camera to me. If you look up here at the top of it, there's a white, looks like video surveillance camera. And then the dish that's over on the back of that would be either a microwave dish or a long-range Wi-Fi antenna. And that would likely convey the signal from that camera to a receiver somewhere inside Israel. Here's another one. Now, it's hard to see, but this is actually, some kind of communications listening device and the big battery, and it's inside a fake rock. And there's another view where the rock is turned upside down, and you can see the surveillance or listening device. It's like a fiberglass mold of a rock that they put in, and they have those. They have them all over the place. Okay, so on top of satellites and drones and other signals intelligence collecting devices, they put those kinds of things in. They also, any place where there's a cell phone tower, it's likely that they have some sort of device on that tower which picks up all the traffic that's going through that tower. We've seen that in use in Afghanistan, Iraq, lots of places. It's fairly straightforward and easy to jack between a cell phone tower and the landline that goes to the hub, some sort of listening device that picks up all the traffic that goes through that particular tower. Okay, so there's that. There's a lot of that going on. And what that shows is that Turkey has a growing intelligence footprint that Israel is countering and saying, yeah, that's too close. Sorry, you can't have that. So they went in and took that out. It'll be interesting to see what Turkey, if Turkey makes any claims to that equipment or issues some angry warning or something like that. Now, that helicopter insertion, as I said, took about 2 hours. And then after they completed their objective, the team withdrew undercover by helicopter before the Syrian forces could regroup and get there. So apparently, according to some reports, Israel actually communicated to Syria via unofficial channels that any attempts to undermine its intelligence operations or tolerate Turkish espionage would trigger decisive action on the part of Israel. Let me just say, this is a very interesting war. We've never seen a war like this before. Normally, a war is between two belligerent parties. You have, two sides fighting each other. It might be two countries, two armies, two organizations, whatever, fighting each other. In this case, you have one country, Israel, fighting like 7 different places all around them. And so we just saw, actually right before I went live, the news came out that Israel struck Sana'a yet again. That's the second time in 2 days. And this time, it looks like they eliminated a bunch of high-ranking Houthi officials. And they did it by coinciding their strikes with a speech that was being given by the leader of the Houthis. And what they did was they figured out where people go to watch that, where important people go to watch that speech. So like the defense minister of the Houthis and people like that. And they all congregate in, certain places around a television or whatever to watch this because, number one, the leader of the Houthis is kind of like the leader of Hezbollah right now. He's in a bunker someplace and not coming out. He's in hiding. If he comes out and sticks his head up, Israel's going to take it off. So Israel did the next best thing. They waited until he gave his televised speech and they bombed the places where the televisions were. All 3 of them, all 3 televisions that they have that are still working in Houthi-controlled territory in Yemen. I'm being facetious, but bottom line is they whacked apparently, we're just getting the news now that Israel took out some really heavy hitters in the Houthi organization. And that's in retaliation for the strikes that the Houthis continue to rain on Israel. They had 2 more yesterday. And this is interesting. Defense Minister Israel Katz, from the command bunker during today's strike, said, and I'm going to read this for you because this is an interesting quote. As we warned the Houthis in Yemen, after the blow, and that word blow in Hebrew, he was speaking Hebrew, could also be termed plague, like the plagues of Egypt. So after the plague of darkness comes the plague of the firstborn. Whoever raises a hand against Israel, his hand will be cut off. So the firstborn in this case, it sounds like, were high-ranking Houthi officials, and more than a couple, maybe 15 to 30 of them taken out all at once. And so more power to them. Couldn't happen to a better group of individuals. Eve Sparks is asking about Russia and Ukraine. I'll talk about that toward the end if I have time, because there is some important stuff happening between Russia and Ukraine. Now, okay, on top of this, so what happened in Syria shows that Israel is making it very clear to the Syrian government, such as it is, that they are not going to back off of Syria. Now, they've actually been in talks with al-Jilani mediated through Azerbaijan to improve the relations between Israel and Syria. And surprisingly, even though Israel keeps striking in Syria, they keep dropping bombs in Syria, they keep doing raids, they have troops holding ground, quite a bit of ground in Syria, and they're controlling pretty much everything between Damascus and the Israeli border now. Even in spite of all of that, al-Jilani appears to be disposed to make a deal with Israel and to sort of put something in writing that will solidify the relationship, sort of codify the relationship between Israel and the new government of Syria. And I think al-Jilani looks at that and says, if I can make deals with my neighbors, that's going to raise my own legitimacy as the new or interim president of Syria. Because right now, that's still an open question, whether or not al-Jilani will actually be able to solidify his reign over Syria. He's got a lot of support, even from the United States, in doing that. But the United States is certainly encouraging them to make a deal with the Israelis so that the Israelis can rest easy because they have maybe a similar deal with Syria that like the one that they have with Egypt, okay, where they made peace with Egypt. Egypt and Israel don't like each other at all. I mean, they come from very different worldviews, Muslim and Jewish, but Israel and Egypt have maintained peace along their border for 30 years or something now, for a long time. And so Israel would like to see something similar happen with the Syrian government, so would the United States. So in the talks that the Israelis and the Syrians are having with one another, some of the conditions that Israel is laying out is that there's going to be limits on the size of your military. There's going to be a humanitarian corridor that is established between the Israeli border and the Druze village of Asweda in the south, so that, I mean, that's a nod to the Druze population in Israel, but that way they can potentially visit their relatives back and forth, come to claim asylum, whatever, but have safe passage between Asweda and the border of Israel. And there's been several other conditions as well, but that's the crux of it. And let's hope that they're able to nail something like that down. Okay, now turning to Gaza, I had the opportunity this morning to interview Ken Isaacs, who is Senior Vice President for Samaritan's Purse, which many of you are likely familiar with Sam's Purse. They are one of the largest charities in the United States, and I would say one of the most effective charities in the world. I've worked alongside Samaritan's Purse and have worked hand in hand with Samaritan's Purse for practically 20 years. Many of the places I go, obviously, they're places where humanitarian aid organizations need to be. And I run into guys from Samaritan's Purse all the time. We've even escorted them, some of the Samaritan's Purse guys, into Syria before and helped them with their mission. Sometimes they have a lot of resources that, like Free Burma Rangers that I work with, don't have, but they don't have the wherewithal, or their policies won't allow them to go right up into the front lines where the real need is. And so they rely on Free Burma Rangers to carry their supplies for the last mile from as close as they can get to the point of need across the sort of no man's land that is the front line. So we have worked with them a lot. And I had very nice discussion with Ken Isaacs today. And I wanted to just play you a little excerpt of that when we got talking about Gaza and the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Take a listen.
We have entered into a collaborative relationship with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. I went and visited with them. I saw them myself. And, I have to tell you, I was a skeptic. I thought, who are these guys? They popped up out of nowhere. This feels a little fishy. I'm not quite sure what's going on. But we have a DART roster, our Disaster Assistance Response Team. And two of the people that are working there for the GHF, my DART roster. Wow. They work for me part-time. So now I've got an in-house line, and they're telling me what it's like. And they said, you need to come and see it, Ken. So I went, and I embedded myself with them for 3 days. I came away. I was impressed. These are professionals. They're not trigger-happy cowboys. They run good logistics. They're thoughtful. They're considerate. They're respectful. And they're very compassionate to the people. So some of the arguments that the UN is putting up, I totally reject those arguments. Arguments such as humanitarian assistance shouldn't be militarized. Okay, well, let's see now. How did that work in Haiti? Oh, you had that humanitarian, and you had armies everywhere from all over the world. What about in Somalia? What about in Bosnia? What about in Darfur? What about in Congo? So it seems to me that when the UN wants to militarize it, it's okay. I think that the UN has their own challenges and their own structure about their humanitarian work there and the effectiveness of it. But I received a report yesterday that nearly 100% of the trucks that they're taking in are being looted. I have videos of those lootings, and those lootings are brutal. It's not like
it's Mad Max. It's zombie apocalypse. It's unbelievable. I've seen it.
And those pallets coming off the truck, and oh my gosh, that was 2,000 pounds just fell over on people. So GHF has now got a women's distribution point at the end of the apocalypse distributions. And it's not pretty, but the stories of GHF killing people are false. Those are false. Do people die at those distributions? They do. Sometimes they get stampeded. And IDF has killed people and acknowledged it, and they have changed their profile and their engagement rules to modify that. So I think that GHF is a very viable entity. I see us doing more with them, and I think the UN has a lot to do to get themselves stabilized, and it's a very contentious place, right?
So that was a very good interview, and the entire interview will be up shortly on our locals page. For those of you that are supporters on locals, you'll get early access to videos like that and many other extras that we pull out and send over there to our faithful supporters. So I appreciate all of you who have gone over to chuckholton.com and have become supporters there, because that's how we're paying the bills now. That really is. I'm still doing my reporting for CBN and Newsmax, but I'm not able to do as much because I've transitioned to do more direct reporting to you through YouTube. So this is going to be viewer funded, and I appreciate all of you who have gone and supported us over there. Go over to chuckholton.com. There's a lot of extra stuff over there. While you're at it, make sure you're subscribed to this channel and hit that like button. So it tells the YouTube algorithm to show this to more people. Now, while we're on the subject of Gaza, there was a IPC report that came out a few days ago, about a week ago, that confirmed that there is famine in Gaza. This is even after Israel has dramatically increased the amount of aid that's gone in. This is after 14 or 15 countries have started airdropping aid every day across Gaza. They're putting more meals into Gaza than people could actually eat. This is in spite of the fact that we're seeing on the ground people just dumping aid that they don't want, just cherry picking and taking the aid that is the tastiest and then just leaving the rest to rot out in the sun because they have so much aid They don't even want it all. But after all that happened, the IPC comes out with a report that says there is famine in Gaza. There's hunger everywhere. People are dying of hunger. Well, the Gaza Health Ministry, which is again owned by Hamas, is still putting that out, and so the UN is parroting those talking points. And the Gaza Health Ministry is saying, "Oh yeah, 10 people died today of hunger across Gaza." If there was a famine in Gaza, given the number of people that live in Gaza, it would have to be more like 250 to 300 people a day dying of hunger for there to be actual famine. But the Israeli government did an investigation of this IPC report. And what they found was that this report is completely bogus. And they put out a press release. They did a press conference about this subject. And I'm going to play you the whole thing. It's like 4 minutes long, I think, but it's definitely worth listening to because it absolutely crushes the IPC report and shows you just how dishonest the UN is willing to be to try to bash Israel. Take a listen.
The IPC manipulated report based only on the IPC data, not addressing any external data and no other contradicting evidence that we have piles of them. Everything that I'm going to show you today is based on IPC data, which is based on Hamas data. Still, IPC made up data in its research, broke their own rules, did cherry picking with evidence, with data, hid contradicting data, and ignore contradicting data. On each claim, I will put just one sharp, clear evidence. With regard to the made-up data that doesn't exist is added to that report. First example, Hamas reports about 6 cases of death every day in Gaza, while the IPC standard in order to declare famine is 188. They are missing 182 cases of death daily, even when it's based on Hamas data. What IPC did in its report? Added a virtual additional 182 death cases a day, just to meet the threshold in order to come to the prefabricated conclusion of famine.
So that's just a part of the press briefing there that they gave. And I mean, I think that says enough that, I mean, it's amazing to watch the United Nations continue to dig its own grave, because it is becoming clearer and clearer all the time that the United Nations cannot be trusted, that they are wholly in the tank for the terrorists, and they are as anti-Semitic as the day is long. It's absolutely crazy. It's just amazing that they have any credibility left with anybody. And really, the only people that give the UN any credibility are people who think like they do and agree with them, I guess. Okay, moving on. I want to move on to our questions, and then maybe I'll have time to get to what's going on in Ukraine. Mossad agent says, okay, that one I already answered. So we're not talking about the Turks who used electronic warfare against IAF aircraft and failed. Yeah, there were some reports of the Turks trying to, what am I trying to say? They flew some of their fighter jets into Syria while the Israelis were doing some bombings in Syria, And they didn't confront those planes directly, but they tried to surveil those planes electronically. And that caused a little bit of consternation with the Israeli jets, who were, like trying to figure out whether or not they were being targeted, that sort of thing. Okay, let's see what else here. Next question. I gotta fix the chat. Okay, next question is, Pamela Trost says, has the IDF developed robots yet to rescue their troops involved in a firefight? I've heard that Ukraine has done that, but I don't know that for sure. I have not seen any indication that the Israelis are using unmanned surface vehicles in any significant way. It doesn't mean they're not testing them or planning to use them. It just means that they're not currently using them at the moment, as far as I know. But this is a good question, Pamela. Tricycle Jesus says, what are the main differences or similarities between this mission and the last one in Syria, where they raided the Iranian missile production facility? Well, here they were not raiding something to destroy it. They were raiding something to exploit it and gather a bunch of intel. And that intel will likely serve to inform future missions into Syria and perhaps elsewhere. Okay. So Eve Sparks, so has Russia and Ukraine at peace? Haven't heard much from that. No, they're not at peace. As a matter of fact, Russia fired almost 600 drones and missiles at Ukraine yesterday, most of them at Kyiv. A couple of those missiles struck right downtown in kind of the area around the government buildings in Kyiv. 18 people were killed. 3 of them were children. So Russia continues to target civilians and civilian infrastructure across Ukraine. And the Ukrainians, on the other hand, have been very laser focused on hitting Russian oil facilities of different kinds, energy facilities of different kinds, because they've managed to take out about 27% of Russia's total ability to process or export oil. And that translates to an immediate hit to Russia's government revenues. And that is how Ukraine can win the war. Ukraine just needs to strike enough Russian income sources to make it so that Russia just cannot pay for this stuff anymore. And then we'll see some real movement. And I think we're already starting to see that. Believe it or not, I mean, a lot of people get the sense that the Ukrainians are on the back foot, that they're losing in Ukraine. And nothing could be further from the truth. The Ukrainians are actually getting into a stronger and stronger position against Russia, even when they give up ground. They're doing so in a way that allows them to exact such an incredible cost from Russia that it makes it all but impossible for Russia to take the entire country. What I mean is, while they're fighting on this line, the Ukrainians will back off from that line and dig a whole system of fortified trenches and bunkers and minefields and all sorts of stuff just behind their lines. Then they will pull back to those new trenches and they'll let the Russians come right into the teeth of these new fighting positions, right through the minefields, et cetera, et cetera. And Russia loses more than 100 dead men for every square kilometer of ground inside Ukraine that gets taken. And that's not a sustainable number. I mean, Russia they can't keep doing that. On top of that, they have baited the Russians to attack in certain places. The Russians attack and push in, and it looks like around Pokrovsk, for example, the Russians have taken Pokrovsk and they've they're, moving forward, but then the Ukrainians come in and use a pincher movement and cut off the Russian forces that have just pushed into that area. So they let them form a bubble and then they cut it off. And then those guys either die or give up. And they take maybe a couple hundred, maybe a couple thousand Russian troops off the table when they do that. And right now, the Ukrainians have managed to retake the town of Pokrovsk down there. So the Ukrainians, the Russians are fighting hard. The Ukrainians are fighting smart. And that's the difference of what we see between Russia and Ukraine today. Now, Russia is fighting a very brutal war by bombing civilians and killing civilians and basically visiting terror, using terrorism tactics against Ukraine. And all that does is solidify the will of the Ukrainian people to keep fighting. So Russia is actually working against itself when it bombs civilian infrastructure all across the area. So Brian McDonald says, Chuck, the Russians are losing 200 men per square kilometer. Is that casualties or is that deaths? Because I heard 100 deaths, and that would roughly translate to a couple hundred casualties, deaths, injuries, and captures. But perhaps I would love it if they're actually getting 200 guys killed for every square kilometer they're taking. And again, the Ukrainians actually have more troops now than Russia does, at least engaged in the war. So the Ukrainians have almost 750,000 men under arms. Not all of those are on the front lines. Some of them are training, some of them are in other areas and, guarding the borders and stuff like that. But suffice it to say that they're bringing roughly twice as much combat power, especially when you measure combat power by its actual destructive capability in terms of the drones and the unmanned ground vehicles, unmanned surface vehicles on the ocean. The Ukrainians struck a guided missile frigate in the Black Sea with 2 explosive drones. And that's the first time that they've reached out as far as they did. And so they are having a dramatic effect on the Russian military, and things are not getting better for Russia. In many places across Russia, especially in places like Crimea, the Russians that live there are not able to get gasoline, or it's very, very expensive now because of the strikes on supply trains, fuel trains, and processing or refineries across Russia. I mean, all across Russia. And the Ukrainians are ramping up their production of the kinds of drones, and now they have this Flamingo missile that they've come up with. It's like a jet-powered missile. And they're going to be able to strike anywhere in Russia. And they're going to just continue to ramp up their strikes. So a lot of people talk about, well, Russia's a much bigger country than Ukraine. Well, it is and it isn't. When you add in the assistance that Ukraine is getting from Europe, which is substantial, and the fact that Ukraine has a direct route to be able to receive things that are given or purchased by Ukraine, given to Ukraine or purchased by Ukraine, they don't have to go through hostile territory to get any of that. They're coming more to parity with the Russian military. Now, I'm not saying that the end is near and that they're likely to win anytime soon. This will probably go on for another year, maybe more. But let's hope that at some point Russia collapses under the weight of its own evil and can no longer sustain the effort inside Ukraine. Let's just hope that happens. And, President Trump can do a lot more than he's doing to hasten that day. He can start by stopping throwing Ukraine under the bus every chance he gets. Okay, so tricycle, Jesus, I talked to that one. Eve Spark says, no, got that one too. Barbie says, do you foresee the U.S. getting military involved in Gaza, Syria, and Ukraine more so than what they are now? No, I don't. Not under President Trump. I don't foresee us getting military involved. If anything, we might get militarily involved in Venezuela, which would have ripple effects on Russia and Iran for sure. We might go back into Iran and do some more bombing there at some point. And we might go back to war against the Houthis at some point if we feel like it's necessary. But I don't foresee us getting involved militarily in Syria, Ukraine, or Gaza, because so far President Trump has been unwilling to do that. He's actually been pulling troops out of those regions and not getting deeper into those three. Kamina says, off topic a bit, but I've been curious what you think about the bounty on barbecue. If you have talked about it and missed it, I did talk about it a little bit. I have to be careful what I say. I've been contacted by various entities who are deeply involved in trying to bring peace to Haiti. And I have been assisting them in various ways as best I can. And there may be a lot more coming to that story. As it stands right now, I am obligated to leave it at that. And I can't talk a lot more about what's going on there because I'm actually a little more involved probably than I intended to be. Ephraim says, do you foresee the water crisis in Iran aiding and bringing down the current regime there? Yes, I do. I think that that's highly likely. It's likely. Let's wait a bit. It's possible, maybe not likely. Okay. The water crisis is severe in Iran. The question is, how does it get better if they overthrow their regime? It probably would get a little better, but I mean, logically, if you think that through, getting rid of the regime is probably, if you have no water, getting rid of the regime is not going to be the first thing on your list. It's going to be like finding water, right? So could be. That's possible. Stasi Abraham says, who funds the UN? The United States funds about 27% of the UN's global annual budget. And then other countries across the world make up the difference. But the United States is by far the largest contributor.
Did you mention our sponsor?
Who was it?
Mention the sponsor.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I will. Yeah, very much so. Okay. All right, folks, we've got, how many people we got online here right now? 1,500 people watching. And I want to give a shout out to our sponsor today, which is Preserve Gold. So let me get over there. Preserve Gold is my new go-to source for stacking physical gold and silver. There's lots of different ways you can do that. I think the most important way right now is that considering the fact that the majority of the people who watch my show are 65 and over, which is surprising to me because YouTube, typically that's a much younger demographic. But I have a lot of people 65 and over who are watching my show, which means you're retired or getting ready to retire. But if you're within 5 years of retirement or indeed into your retirement, then you should be very careful about putting all of your investments into mutual funds or stocks, things that are likely to be volatile in the market. And one of the things that people worry about is that, well, if I invest in gold or silver, I'm just investing in pieces of paper. I'm investing in like gold exchange traded funds or derivatives of gold that are not actual gold. But through Preserve Gold, you can invest directly in physical gold and silver. And you can even put a portion of your 401k or your IRA or your SEP into physical gold and silver. What they do is they put it into a vault somewhere with your name on it. And to me, that's just a really smart move. Now, the predictions are, even though gold is at a pretty high price right now, it's $3,200 or so per ounce. You can if you read about the predictions for where gold is going based on the world situation in terms of lots of not sure what's going to happen going on out there, right? And the industrial demand for gold, because as the amount of cell phones increase, every cell phone has gold in it, gold connectors usually, and maybe not, it's a few cents worth of gold in each cell phone, but with billions of cell phones out there, you're talking about hundreds of tons of gold that needs to be eaten up every year by these devices. So that just means the demand for gold is going to increase, and that is good for the price prospects of gold. So highly recommend you go to preservegold.com. I trust them. They're no nonsense. They will tell it like it is, and if it's not right for you, they'll tell you so. But you can go to that website, preservegold.com/hotzone, or text the word Chuck to 50505, and they'll send you a free wealth protection guide and help you get started. So give it a shot. And thank you to our sponsors, Preserve Gold. Appreciate you guys. Now, back to our questions. I don't see how Ukraine can say they're winning when they lost 1/3 of their territory, including Crimea, since 2014. It's more like 20%, Maria, not 30%. And winning for Ukraine means survival. That's what winning looks like for Ukraine. Because if Russia takes over all of Ukraine, Ukraine will cease to exist as a country and likely as a people. So, yeah, they may lose a portion of their country, and that's not good. But if Ukraine survives as a nation, that's called winning for them. So it all depends on how you define it. Adrienne says, so Canada giving $2 billion in aid, does that help Ukraine? Well, it doesn't hurt. Certainly doesn't hurt Ukraine. Sue Allen says, do you feel Putin will be brought down soon? No, not soon. I mean, I hope so, but I mean, that's one thing I'd love to be wrong on. But he has, before he started all this, he consolidated power to a great extent. And people don't realize this, but everybody says Elon Musk is the wealthiest man on planet Earth. That's not actually true. Vladimir Putin is the wealthiest man on planet Earth. And how can we say that? Well, because in addition to the many tens of billions of dollars that he has to his own name, virtually all of the very, very wealthy oligarchs who are still alive in Putin's Russia got their wealth because of Vladimir Putin. And here's the deal that Putin made with those guys. He told them, listen, I'm going to give you this industry, or I'm going to give you this company like Rosneft or something like that. And it's yours. You run it. But just understand that all of that wealth belongs to me. Now, you're welcome to live a good life, spend that money. But if I ever want it back, you're giving that back to me. You need to understand that all of the wealth that you have comes from me. And so what I'm saying is that Vladimir Putin lays claim to essentially all of the wealth in Russia. And he does it in very underhanded, nefarious ways, but he still lays claim to all of it. So that means that he's got far more than 200 billion at his disposal, right? Put it that way. Byron Perry says Ukrainian soldiers are now training Mexican cartels on drones. Is this where our aid goes? No, Byron, that's not where our aid goes. It's true that they're not training Mexican cartels on drones. They're training Mexican military on how to use drones. Now, there are certainly Russians who, like from the Wagner Group, who have gone to Mexico and have worked with the cartels. There's no question about that. But the fake news that Ukrainian troops are being sent by the Ukrainian government to work with Mexican cartels is categorically false. It's Russian propaganda, and it's the kind of thing that you'd hear from shills like Tucker Carlson and others who are 100% in the tank for Russia. Now, speaking of 100% in the tank for Russia, our good friend Scott Ritter participated in a lively, I guess you could say, debate with my friend Matt Tardio on Twitter the other day, over on X. And Matt Tardio absolutely crushed him, like wiped the floor with Scott Ritter. It was the kind of thing I was going like, oh my gosh, like I'm just watching this. I was just getting so excited because Matt Tardio just took him apart to the point where Scott Ritter lost his cool and just started saying, F you, F you, F you, was just like screaming at him over the, and you know, one might say that if you're in a debate and you find yourself at the point where all you can do is scream F you at your opponent, you've lost the debate. One could say that. And so if you want if you like to watch somebody just absolutely melt down in real time on television, go watch that debate between Matt Tardio and Scott Ritter. I don't know how he got that set up, but more power to Matt. Good job, Matt, for putting that together. And if you don't follow Matt Tardio, you should. A lot of people say, why are you touting your competition? I guess you could call him my competition because he does the same thing I do. He does daily live YouTube reports about geopolitics, but I don't have any problem doing that because Matt is a very, very good guy. He's a Christian brother and he knows his stuff. He's been around and he knows his stuff, and I respect him. And so I don't have any problem encouraging you to go and subscribe to his channel as well. But please subscribe to this one too, okay? Thank you very much for all those nice words, okay? That looks like that's all for our questions for today. And I think we are, just over an hour. So thank you very much for watching the Hot Zone today. I appreciate all of you. I look forward to our next meeting. And Aldo Schmidak says, what's his name again? Matt Tardio, Tardio. You can find him on X. It's just at Anger Tab, ANGERTAB. Anger Tab, that's a takeoff on Ranger Tab because Matt was also a Ranger like I was. And Speak the Truth is his podcast on YouTube. So Matt, I hope you get a bunch of new followers after today's Hot Zone. All right, folks, thank you very much for being a part of our little family, and we will see you again next time. Take care.